Welcome to the Journal of the Southwest Radio Hour podcast, a production of the University of Arizona Southwest Center in the School of Global Studies. I'm Jeff Banister. I'm speaking today with my brother-in-law, Justin Driscoll, about his rattlesnake bite experience in 2021. He and a friend were hiking in Aravaipa Canyon, a lush riparian area just over 2 hours by car north of Tucson. Aravaipa is one of the few spots in the region with a perennial stream flow, and because of this, the wildlife there is abundant and diverse. This includes the Western Diamondback rattlesnake that would alter the course of Justin's journey that day. Hiking in the canyon requires a permit, which keeps human foot traffic to a minimum. There are a few scattered houses and ranches around, but once you're on the trail, which mostly follows the creek bed, the place feels remote. Remote, that is, for a state that now has around 7.5 million residents. In any case, good luck finding cell phone service there. Much of the hike follows a narrow corridor densely treed with cottonwoods, willows, large sycamores, and ash. Native grasses and shrubs abound. In places where the tree canopy opens up, you can see gorgeous cliff faces and red rock hills densely studded with saguaros. All of these factors, topography, vegetation, surface water, wildlife, and remoteness, combined to make Justin's experience hiking in Aravaipa Creek that day a deeply memorable one, to say the least. And I'll let him tell you the rest. We hope you enjoy this episode of the JSW Radio Hour, and we thank you for your support. Well, Justin Driscoll, welcome to the JSW Radio podcast.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's good to be here.
So our listeners will know that you were bitten by a rattlesnake during a hiking trip through Aravaipa Canyon in 2021. So why don't we just jump right in and you can set the scene for us?
Sure. So I am an Arizona native and outdoors lover. So every chance I get, I am out doing something. And in this case, we had gone to Aravaipa Canyon with a good friend of mine. We were going to spend 3 days hiking through it and just enjoying it. And we had gone in about halfway, made a camp. And the next morning, we were going to have a pretty leisurely hike to the other side of the canyon. It's about 12 miles total. So we only had 6 round trip to do. And we got a couple of hours into the morning, and in Aravaipa, you're hiking through water. It's a pretty narrow canyon with the creek running through it. And I just stopped. It was a gorgeous location, looking up at the canyon walls, and the water temperature was perfect. It was just a beautiful day. And
I interrupt you. Can you just let us know where Aravaipa Canyon is for those listeners who don't know the area very well? Where is it in relationship to Tucson and in Arizona and Phoenix?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's southern part of the state, and it's not close to anything. On one side of it, the east side, it's really, really remote. It's if I remember right, about 25 miles to get to Klondike, Arizona, and Klondike's not much. I think they say there's 40 people that live there. I'm guessing they maybe even inflate that a little bit. So we had gone to the west entrance where there are some ranches going in there, cell phone service, before you get into the canyon anyway, and a ranger station there. I believe it's and I want to say it's about 3.5 hour drive from Phoenix to get there.
Mm-hmm. And this is in pure Sonoran Desert. What are you going through when you're driving from Phoenix?
Yeah, it's fairly desolate going out to it. It's sort of like a lot of the hikes I've done into the side canyon, into the Grand Canyon, where you're driving into it. It just doesn't look like where you're going. Very dry, desolate desert, nothing much around there. And as you drive in, and you start getting closer to the side of the canyon, the west side where we came in especially, and the water is flowing through, all of a sudden there's There's these big, beautiful trees, cottonwoods everywhere. It just gets really lush all of a sudden. So it's literally this oasis in the middle of a very, very dry desert.
Hmm.
So it's beautiful to drive in. You start passing some ranches. The wildlife's not very afraid there. You see the quaddies a lot. It's one of the only places I've seen them pretty regularly. There's deer around. Again, they're not really hiding. They're in a pretty safe paradise there.
Hmm. Hmm. So you're there. You hike in for a little bit. It's a beautiful day. Uh, so what happens from there? Where did you guys head? You're planning to camp there for a couple nights?
We were going to, yeah, 2 nights. We had hiked in. We got kind of a late start. We drove, early from Phoenix. So we got there, I guess, late morning and started hiking in with our big packs. We were going to be there 2 nights, 3 days. And we had permits. You have to get permits to camp in Aravaipa Canyon. I forget how many people they allow in, but it's not a lot. You're back there alone. You might run into some people. Um, so we had set up camp in a nice spot, kind of early in the evening, late afternoon. Um, had a nice time, had dinner, and then in the morning, our plan was we were going to hike the rest of the way. We were roughly halfway through when we stopped the first night. We were going to hike the rest of the way to the east entrance and come back. It was going to be a fairly leisurely day. And I mentioned earlier, you're hiking through the creek or right next to it. It's a narrow canyon with the water running through.
Hmm.
So we were a couple of hours into our hike. We got a nice slow start, extra cup of coffee in the morning. And we got about 2.5 hours into our morning. It's hard to say exactly, sometime around 11 a.m. And my friend Jay hiked up over this berm coming out of the water, and there was a really narrow, well-defined trail. And so I'm right behind him. It's so narrow that I'm, almost in his footsteps. And we got, I don't know, 50 yards or so. And there was, thick grass on the left side of us and these low shrub bushes on the right of the path. We both had hiking poles, going through the water, especially the first day with our heavy packs. It was really good for balance. And so I still had the poles, even though I had the lighter pack, and so did Jay. And we get onto this path, and we know there's a lot of snakes there, and it's a good warm day.
Hmm.
So we're both with the poles in front of us, tapping the grass, one on each side, just trying to scare any snakes that might have been hiding in there out,
Hmm.
and not really thinking about it too much. We'd done miles of this already and hadn't had any problems, and kind of defenses are down, so to speak. And yeah, just I mean, out of nowhere, no rattle, did not see the snake, and Jay had just walked, presumably, as close as I did to the snake right in front of me.
Hmm.
And yeah, next thing I know, I am flying through the air, sort of like what I would assume it'd be like if you stepped on a live wire.
Hmm.
And I don't know, 5 yards, I flew, landed on my side, kind of knocked the wind out of me. And even though neither of us had seen the snake or heard anything, it was strange because we both knew what had happened.
Hmm.
So like it's instantly I knew what had happened, even though I was really confused about it at the same time. And so I jumped up pretty quickly and I scrambled over to this big rock that was there, small boulder, I guess, and climbed up on top of it. My mind was racing, and I had this idea that the snake was going to attack. It was still after me.
Hmm.
So got up on the rock for a little bit of safety and, to be able to see what had happened. And I guess I paused before I got on the rock because I did catch a glimpse of the snake. And it's funny, when they asked me later, all I could remember was that there was these red speckles in the snake. Um, Really wasn't thinking too much other than the fact that it was going away from me. That's all I really needed to know then. So yeah, then I needed to figure out how bad a shape I was in. So I got up on the rock and I pulled my shoe off, and I just saw two tiny little red marks just above my ankle bone. I should mention I was wearing water shoes, shoes that drained really well, not boots, since we were in and out of the water. And the snake had struck me just, I mean, not even an inch above the top of my shoe, which I'm sure is no accident either.
Hmm.
So I see these two little punctures, didn't look like much, and all it had felt like was I like a swirl cactus. When I was a little boy doing dumb stuff, I kicked a saguaro cactus for whatever reason. Seemed like a good idea, and of course it hurt. This felt really similar to that. It was a really quick, sharp pain, and then at this point on top of the rock, I really didn't feel anything. Adrenaline, maybe just the fact that it was two really small puncture wounds, wasn't a big wound. So I look at my ankle, I see the puncture wounds, and in my head, I'm like, well, maybe I'm okay. Maybe it was a dry bite, maybe it wasn't a rattlesnake. Didn't rattle anyway.
What's a dry bite?
Dry bite is occasionally a snake will strike something, but not inject venom. Could be that they'd already used up their venom, or, they've got the older ones anyway, they have some control how much venom they inject.
Hmm.
So, wishful thinking, I guess. I thought maybe that one of those had happened to me.
Uh-huh. And what's your friend Jay doing all this time in this quick moment?
Yeah, so Jay, I don't know exactly what he was what he was doing. He recognized very quickly what had happened. I just remember him yelling, "Did he get you, man?" And at that point, I got up and climbed up on the rock,
Hmm.
and I know he had gone over to look at the snake as well,
Hmm.
and he saw that it was leaving. So at that point, he came back over to the rock where I was, and he saw what happened next. I those two little puncture wounds, I saw just these tiny little fine uh, streams of blood start coming out, and I kind of pinched and massaged the skin around my ankle where that was happening, and I saw clear jelly like substance kind of ooze out of the two little puncture wounds, and suddenly I knew I wasn't okay. It wasn't a dry bite. I could see the venom.
That was the
So
venom coming out, the ooze.
yeah, that was the venom. So a little of that came out, and then it started mixing with the blood, and it made this really very red but very watery, two like drools coming down my ankle from the puncture wounds.
Uh-huh. So probably a really good reason, or yeah, a really good reason for not sucking the blood out.
Right,
The
right.
that you might see in an old western or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I am very grateful for my experience, especially in the desert. And Jay's, he's also a Arizona kid, and he spent a lot of time doing this. We both knew a lot, not everything I wish we knew, but we knew a lot of what to do and what not to do. So, we were all raised on those scary things that you kept in your pack, where got the razor blade out and you cut a hole and then sucked out of it.
Hmm.
So we knew that was a bad idea. Um, so we found kind of a thick rope that I keep in my day pack just for whatever may come up. We knew you're not supposed to put a tourniquet on, but it was kind of the best option we had. So we wrapped it around my ankle. Actually, we wrapped it, I guess, around my calf loosely, somewhat loosely, firm, but we didn't crank it down or anything like that. And at least my first thought, I know Jay went along with it, was we better get out of here. You know, we knew we were in trouble. I knew it was only going to get worse with the snake venom.
Hmm.
So obviously not a very well conceived plan, but let's hike 8 or 9 miles, back out to the car and get some help, which is making me chuckle a little bit now. We made it about 50 yards, and I was really leaning on one of my hiking poles, and I could see it was bending and probably wasn't gonna last much longer. It's not made to take a man's weight like that. So it became obvious we had to stop. Jay was pretty far out ahead of me. His adrenaline was going too, and I don't think he realized that I was dragging behind. And so he stops, and at this point, it really started to hurt. I could feel my leg was seizing up. Started tightening up, and kind of felt like stone almost. I could feel it coming up my leg, and it started to burn. So it turns out we were in this in this really beautiful place. If we were going to choose a camp, it's a place you might stop. Kind of sandy side to the creek, and these big old cottonwood trees over us with shade. And so I kind of collapsed down onto the bank of the creek, with Jade there next to me, and my feet are dangling in the water. I mean, it's kind of comically beautiful and peaceful where I was. So we were there a little bit trying to figure out what to do. We had, it seemed like a long debate about what Jay was going to do. He didn't want to leave, didn't want to leave me there exposed. But I think he knew, and I definitely knew that he had to get out of there. I wasn't going anywhere. Mm-hmm. So we have our discussion about it. It probably all happened in reality in 15 seconds or so, but time didn't mean a whole lot at that point. So Jay finally agreed and started heading back out, the way we had come in. And I just remember at that point realizing how alone I was going to be, in the middle of this kind of desolate canyon, and the venom taking hold and me feeling worse by the minute. So I do remember asking Jay, or telling Jay first that I was going to be okay, that he could hike out of the canyon. And it just didn't sound right. I realized when I said it that I wasn't so sure that I really was going to be okay. So Jay pauses, he looks at me and doesn't really know what to say. So I'm like, tell me I'm going to be okay. Tell me I'm all right, Jay. And, my mind racing and the fear setting in. And, I just sort of almost like a mantra, tell me I'm going to be okay. Tell me I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. So Jay was sort of frozen there. He just decided to leave, and then, got this reaction from me. Yeah. So he tells me I'm going to be okay. And he starts heading back away. He's about to kind of disappear into the canyon between all the growth there and everything. And I remember the last thing telling him not to go too fast, to take it easy, because I realized, if he was pushing himself too hard to get those 8 or 9 miles out of the canyon and he hurt himself, then, well, we were both gonna spend an extra night in Aravaipa not feeling too good about it. So then Jay's gone, and I'm laying there just as alone as I've ever been in my life. My mind's still racing, and it went back to the snake, I think probably pretty understandably. And I just had it in my head that the snake was gonna attack, that it was gonna come after me. So I'm laying there, at this point I could, not move around too well. My whole body was starting to hurt. I could kind of halfway roll over to my side, and I still had my day pack, and I had one of the hiking poles. And I remember reaching up over to my head where I couldn't really see what was happening, and sweeping the ground, sweeping the dirt with my hiking pole, just trying to fend off any attacking snakes that might be coming. So we did that for, I'm not really sure how long. The rest of the story, the timeline's a little hard to say. Everything kind of gets a little fuzzy from there. But I do remember realizing that I was not under attack, that I was in a safe place. I'd spent a lot of time in not hurt, but a lot of time, down low in the desert and the forest and just being part of the scene. So I just started focusing on my breath, just trying to calm myself down and, get some composure about the situation. I did eventually. I don't know how long I was sitting there, just breathing, right? In and hold it and back out. But as I started to calm down, I really recognized where I was and how beautiful it was. I was laying there. My body was not okay, but it's a comfortable place, kind of a sandy beach. Temperature's great, breeze was blowing, and I remember kind of, I was amused by that. I was chuckling at how scary the situation was and how beautiful of a place I was in at the same time. It just didn't, they weren't congruent, right? They didn't go together. So as I laid there, I would shout out for help every once in a while. It got to a point where I was trying to shout for help, but I'm pretty sure that no sound was coming out. As this was happening, my leg was burning. I could feel it moving up my leg. And my mind started getting really fuzzy. Started kind of coming in and out of this conscious state where I was very aware of what was happening to this, semi-conscious state where, the whole world was kind of fuzzy and my leg didn't hurt, which was better, in a lot of ways. That was a nice relief. But then the venom got into my digestive system, which, now I know a lot more about what a diamondback's venom does to a person. But, then I didn't. I was just worried about my leg and, where it had struck me. And, we've heard of necrosis and the bad things that it can do to your flesh. But I wasn't thinking about, the systemic response. So I was there trying to make myself as comfortable as I could, knowing I was going to have to wait there for a while. And, just all of a sudden it hit me really fast and I got nauseous and just immediately started vomiting, which was a really awkward thing to do because I couldn't move away from it. So all I could do is sort of roll over onto my right side halfway and, vomit, do my best not to get it on myself. And this went on for a while. I would lean over and I'd retch. After not too long, I didn't have a whole lot in my system to start with. It was quite a long time from breakfast and we hadn't had lunch. So I sort of settled back into that kind of fuzzier, softer place, and kind of rolled over every once in a while and I'd retch and it was pretty uncomfortable. I couldn't really relax. I couldn't really sleep.
And are you kind of in and out of consciousness, or are you? I mean, your things are.
Yeah, I would go into this sort of like almost dreamlike kind of state where I wouldn't be so worried, and I wasn't worried about my foot. But then I would get nauseous again, and that would bring me back out of it. And I started having the practical, scary thoughts about what was really going on. So it was really difficult to get into that comfortable, almost like meditative place, keep myself calm when my body was reacting the way that it was. Mm-hmm. So I would, yes, is the short answer. I would be in that kind of softer, fuzzy place, and then I'd start retching again, and it would come to, and then that would subside, and I'd go back into that kind of semi-conscious state. So that went on for a little while, and I kind of got the pattern down, and the vomiting slowed down a little bit. And then it got into my lungs. It got into my, the rest of my system just as it's spreading. And really suddenly I had a really sharp cramp in my lungs. And I couldn't take a full breath anymore. I was just having to take really shallow breaths in and out. And it seemed like that triggered more retching. And as I would throw up, it would cause more cramping in my lungs. So I really had to focus on my breathing. Between the two, it got very difficult just to keep enough oxygen coming in and out. That was probably the worst part of it. I'm there completely alone. Jay had been gone for, what felt like hours. It might have been hours, not really sure. And now I don't understand what's happening with my body.
Mm.
I'd never heard of this being symptoms of a snake bite. So suddenly my leg was the least of my worries. I started really wondering if I was going to make it out of there. I thought I was having a especially bad reaction to it, that maybe other people don't. And I wasn't sure I was going to be able to keep breathing until somebody else got there. So yeah, it was scary. That was the scariest point for me. After some time, again, I'm not really sure how long, I got a little bit of relief, I guess, from my body. I figured out how to take those shallow breaths, and thankfully the vomiting stopped, so I could just focus on my the shallow breaths I was taking, and I got into an okay spot with that, where I was breathing. I wasn't retching, and I got a chance to look around again, and I see this beautiful place I was in, and I hadn't really thought about dying before that point too much, but now my mind was a little calmer. My body is not okay, and I'm having trouble breathing. I don't know how long I'm going to be there, and I didn't really think that I was going to die, but I knew that it was a very real possibility. From being exposed out there was a little bit on my mind, but just not being able to breathe. And I assumed it was going to keep getting worse, as it had been. So I got to this fairly peaceful place about that. I suddenly really appreciated again how beautiful this place was, and that I was, doing what I love to do most. And I started thinking about what this was going to be like for everybody else in my life when they find out, if I died, that I had died out there. And I really started going one by one. I would envision that person, and then I would think about what their reaction would be and what their life would be afterward. And I slowly realized, there's a lot of great people in my life that really care about me, and they would be sad, but that they were all going to be okay. And that I had, left my mark, so to speak. I had made my influence on their life, and I was really happy about what I was seeing, how all of them were going to be. I got to my daughter, Cassidy, pretty quickly. And I actually ended up swelling up with pride and happiness, especially as I thought about her. She was, she was in her early 20s and on her way to graduating college, and, just a really smart woman, and had the world in front of her. And, I wasn't done being her dad yet, but she wasn't a child, and I had given her a good start, or had a good place in that. And I knew she was going to be okay. I also know that she knows me well enough to know that I would have died doing what I really like to do, what I want to be doing. So all of this, it gave me peace and pride. There was no flash of my life. There wasn't a lot of regret, things that I didn't get to do. I wasn't thinking about those things at all. It was thinking about people, and it was settling into a kind of a tedium. It was boring after a while. I mean, it's kind of a weird word to use. Paying attention to my body, I felt terrible, lonely, stuck. But there was also a lot of waiting. I didn't die, obviously, and I laid there for a long, long time. Again, long time didn't mean a lot to me. 15 minutes, 3 hours, it all felt the same. It turns out later, as I put the timeline together, that it was a couple of hours. And then some help showed up. Jay had passed a group of young hikers, a couple of men, a couple of women, hiking in to Aravaipa as he was hiking out. And he had stopped long enough, in his push to get back out and find help to tell them what had happened and described where I was. I wasn't hard to find. It's such a narrow canyon. It'd be hard to miss. So they hiked in and found me. And, I kind of heard them coming, but I was in this, fuzzy mental state again. And I remember one of them in particular walked right up to me and he told me, your friend Jay told us what happened. And I want you to know that we're here now and we're not going anywhere again until you're safe. And hearing that just meant everything to me. It felt like for sure I wasn't going to die. I had people there. They were they were looking after me. No wild animals going to come up and attack or, anything like that. I knew they'd help first responders find me. So while this comfort, this relief, I guess, was kind of settling in, with without even hesitating, this same young man takes a camp plate out of his bag and he comes up right next to me. And keep in mind, this is during the pandemic. Everybody's trying to social distance. Mm-hmm. And this guy takes his plate and he starts using it as a shovel and shoveling my vomit into the creek to get it away from me. And I was just so touched by that. It not only was he willing to sit there with me, but, put his own health, his own life in jeopardy. We were all especially afraid of COVID at that point. And here's this guy, right? He just dives right into, everything that had just come out of my stomach over the last hour. So he does that. I'm, again, kind of in and out of the reality of the situation. And, I woke up the next time and he and one of the women that were with him were removing that rope that Jay and I tied around my calf. And they had, I assume from their pack, an ace bandage. So they wrapped my foot and my ankle firmly with the ace bandage, which was the right thing to do. And I found out later they had found the little first aid manual that was in the little traveler kit that I had. And they were doing what it said. They were following the directions. I'm sure it was kind of boring for them too, sitting there for so long. It's kind of a cute little side story. Once I was healthy, I found that booklet that they were reading, and they had drawn sketches in there of rattlesnake, and they left me a little note from my snake friends. It still makes me laugh. I like to go back and look at that book every once in a while. So more time passes. There's not much for anybody to do. I'm in and out of the reality of the situation. I can hear the four of them, kind of laughing and talking and, just doing what four people would do with nothing else. Come over and check on me every once in a while, but not much to it. And then another couple walked up. They had come in from that remote east entrance that I mentioned earlier. And again, not quite halfway through the canyon for them. And I heard them talking to the four hikers that had been there with me. And then they came over and started small talk with me, which again, I was chuckling about. Their questions brought me back, a little more to the reality, and here I am having a typical small talk conversation with these strangers, while I'm laying on the ground looking at them. They're standing over me. So I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, but I know I talked about my daughter. I think I told them where she was going to school, maybe what I did for a living. I mean, just the stuff you would talk to if you had a conversation with somebody you just met for the first time, and everything was normal. So I heard them talking to the four other hikers that were there, and they confirmed that there was nothing for us in the east entrance. There's no people. They hadn't passed anybody. There's no phone signal at all. And then, just a longer drive to get help if we did manage to get out that way. So one of the four young hikers decided that he was going to do something about this, and he was going to hike up the side of one of the canyon walls. The canyon there is, I don't know, probably 1,000 feet high at some points. It wasn't where we were, but it was very steep and a big climb out. So he took off to go find his way. And the two hikers that had come up, the couple, they asked me if they could pray for me. I'm not a religious man, but I wasn't going to turn down any sort of help at this point. So they stood over me. They held hands and they prayed. I couldn't tell you what they said, exactly what the prayer was. It sounded like a Christian prayer, as you would expect, talking to God and, asking him to look over me to help with the situation. And then I just sort of faded out again. But I did feel more comfortable in that moment than at any other through the whole process. I was still really touched on how everybody was responding. And the energy it felt like that these people had created above me just felt like this kind of warm, safe bubble that kind of, rested down on me. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful thing. And I cried, I teared up, and then I faded away again. So when I came back to the reality in the canyon, the couple was gone. They had moved on. I assume hiked, kept hiking the way they had come in. There was nothing they could do to help at that point. Mm-hmm. And what had brought me back to reality was the young hiker that had tried to hike out of the canyon had come back. And I wasn't surprised. I didn't have much hope that he was gonna find help that way. And he didn't. I don't know how far he made it, but all he saw was harsh desert and no people around, no phone signal. So the five of us just settled in, me laying by the river where I had been the whole time, trying to stay calm and breathe and not vomit. And they, sitting over the side, I could, again, hear their conversations, not really part of what they were saying. I couldn't quite follow it. And there we laid. I mean, it felt like days. It went on and on and on. I would come to and see where I was and the reality of the situation. And then just this desperation almost to get out of here. A little bit like when you're a kid on a really long road trip and you've been stuck in the back seat for so long, just completely out of control. I had no control of the situation. I just had to lay there, and wait.
So of course you didn't know this at the time, but knowing now after you talked to Jay, after the event and stuff, the people are arrayed around you. You're waiting for something to happen, rescue. And then what Jay, now is, trudging back. Is he going back to the Brandenburg ranger station there, or he's going to go try to find a signal? What's happening?
Yeah, signal was his focus. I don't think either of us knew that the ranger station was there at that point. Mm-hmm. So he had reached the end of the canyon, and I think it was probably about an hour, maybe 45 minutes from there until help did arrive for me. Mm-hmm. But he tells me later he got in his truck and he started driving back out the dirt road the way we had come, with his mobile phone in his hand, just looking for a bar, just give me a bar. So he got a little signal. He called 911, told him what had happened, and they directed him back to the ranger station, and obviously immediately called for help. So they had dispatched a helicopter from Phoenix. I think they were from Phoenix, but from DPS helicopter, Department of Public Safety. And then, there wasn't much left for him to do either. He stayed there in the ranger station. He tells me later he didn't want to leave because he'd be out of signal for a while, and he wanted to make sure that they had got me, they had rescued me. So he called another of my really good friends, Kyle, to let him know what was happening, and I think he knew at that point what hospital they were taking me to. Because when I got there, Kyle was there waiting for me.
Okay. So back to the canyon. There you are.
So back to the canyon, laying there, just breathing and trying to pass time. And I don't remember much of that period there. I was really fuzzy and definitely not fully conscious. But I do remember one point. I think I really scared one of the four hikers who I think was checking on me. She had come a little closer, and I started, just really uncomfortable. Everything was uncomfortable and kind of writhing around a little bit and not fully conscious. And I remember saying, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it. And to me, what that meant was I was losing my mind because I was just so stuck and vulnerable and nothing I could do about it. And that I guess tedium that goes along with it. Of course, what she heard was, I think I'm going to die, and she sat there for a while with me. Just again, I felt bad for these people that they were there having to take care of me for this, but she just sat there, not knowing what to say, and just telling me, "You're not going to die. You're not going to die." And then I sort of, faded back into that fuzzy world where I'd spent most of the day. So more time passes, don't really, again, know how long. And suddenly I can feel it. I can feel the helicopter a long ways off, like, a vibration, in my chest, like, rolling down the canyon. And soon I heard it soon after that, and it just kept getting louder and louder and louder. It reminded me a lot of the war movies, the Vietnam War movies. There's always a scene where the choppers coming in to save the soldiers that are stuck. And it felt a lot like that to me, behind enemy lines, so to speak, right? And the helicopters coming. So it felt like a very long time. It was getting louder and louder and louder, but I'm not seeing it. And it's so loud at this point, still not seeing it. Turns out they were up above the canyon at that point, and it's such a narrow canyon with so much vegetation in it that they were looking for a place they could either land or whatever they were trying to do to get to me. Mm-hmm. And they found a little clearing. It was less than 100 yards from where I'd been laying. And it was so loud at this point, the wind from the rotors and the engine noise. And I was just elated, of course. My helplessness was coming to an end. I was going to get out of this canyon. I should mention it was getting dark at that point. So before the helicopter showed up, before we heard it, I remember hearing the four hikers talking about how they were going to get through the night with me. My tent and my gear was still miles away at that first camp, the first night where we stayed. And they were debating, do they hike and get my stuff? And if they put up my tent, how would they get me into it? And, just the practical reality of we probably are going to spend the night out here. And that just amped up everything for me. It was It felt minute by minute, just trying to get through this and get out of the situation. And now all of a sudden we're talking about spending, another 8, 9, 10 hours there. I assumed the helicopter couldn't come in after dark. And, I started, the fear really ratcheted up again, what was going to happen to me, and could my body handle that much more time of the venom, and, what else was going to happen to my body, waiting that long. And then that is when we all felt the helicopter coming. Mm-hmm. So it was such a relief. I can only imagine for the other hikers as well. They were in a rough spot, right? And I don't think they knew what to do for me either. So the helicopter appears. I can see it, over this little clearing. Like I said, not even 100 yards from where we were. And the two men picked me up, like literally picked me up. I couldn't get up. I couldn't put any weight on, I don't think, either of my legs at this point. And one under each armpit, my hands over their shoulders, and they just picked me up off the ground and shuttled me over to, underneath where the helicopter was. By this point, I could see one of the officers coming down on a cable from the helicopter, which I was so happy at this point. Nothing hurt. Felt a little bit like a dream, but I knew I was okay, and I knew I was getting out of there. And then when I realized that they weren't going to put me in one of those gurneys outside of the helicopter that you lay in, I was even happier. Those things looked terrifying to me. So this officer slowly drops down from this cable, and I can see the helicopter trying to stay stable, and she's swaying just a little bit. She gets down to the bottom, to the ground, and by this point the two men had got me over to where she was, and I dropped down to the ground so that they could put a harness on me. So I was sitting on the ground, and this DPS officer was all business. She was shouting commands. She told the two hikers to get away. She had this, big, thick, heavy harness on me. I don't even remember it going on, but it must have taken a little bit. It's a complicated harness. Mm-hmm. And then she connected us, and they yanked us back up. And I just, I was just so happy at this point. I remember thinking it felt a little bit like a amusement ride. It was going up the steep part of the roller coaster, so to speak. I remember having the thought that this would probably be terrifying, in a normal situation, being, suspended in the air. I'd never been in a helicopter before. And of course, the closer we got, the louder it got. And the whole way up there, the DPS officer was just shouting instructions at me, mostly, don't touch anything. She's yelling over and over, don't touch anything. And that's all I could hear over the helicopter. We got up to the top, and we were swaying a little bit. And of course, the right side, I got struck on my right ankle. The right side just slammed really hard into the side of the helicopter. I could hear the DPS officer sort of, knock the air out of her a little bit. And there were 3 other officers in the helicopter. It didn't bother me at all that we had hit the side of the chopper. I was very awake at that point, adrenaline going. And I remember thinking it should have hurt, but it really didn't. So there were 2 DPS officers in the front, the pilots, and the third that hadn't dropped down, grabbed our harnesses and not gently, yanked us into the helicopter. Wasn't a graceful entrance. We both tumbled in, hit the bottom of the helicopter pretty hard. And they quickly unhooked us, got the cable out of the way. And these people were good. They had me on a seat. They put an IV in, which was, hydrating me. I was incredibly dehydrated, as you can imagine. And pushed some anti-nausea medicine, and I assumed some pain medicine as well. But I felt great. I almost felt, I almost felt silly for making a big deal out of it at that point, which is kind of silly itself. If I feel this good, maybe I could have got myself out of there. Maybe I didn't need six people to hang out with me for a while in the canyon. Maybe I didn't need a helicopter to come pick me up. I felt good. I wasn't nauseous, and I just felt good. We start heading in, and again, just sort of making chit chat with the officers. They were great. They had calmed down, and it was just almost a normal conversation. My day pack had made it up into the helicopter with me as well, which I hadn't realized at first. But it had got pushed out of the way. It was in the corner of the helicopter, and I suddenly remembered that I had a little pistol that I carry with me when I'm hiking, and that the DPS officers might not love that idea too much. But definitely when I got to the hospital, I figured they wouldn't like that too much. So, I tell the officers it's in there, and that just led to some more, conversation about guns and what I was carrying. And they didn't care. They didn't have any interest in what was in the pack at all. Part of the conversation I remember as well was joking around and asking them how expensive this ride was going to be. They all started laughing, and apparently, if it's a true emergency, Arizona DPS doesn't charge you. So, chuckling again and made a joke. Everything's getting better here, right? I'm out of the canyon, even got a free ride.
And where are you heading?
They immediately started to Scottsdale. We are closer to Tucson, and I did ask where we were going right before I asked how expensive it is going to be, and they told me. They also told me that Tucson was closer, but that the hospitals in Scottsdale were more equipped with anti-venom. And then they gave me a choice. They asked if I'd rather go to Tucson, which, obviously that wasn't better for me. I lived in Scottsdale, so being there was better just for practicality as well. Mm. So, we flew to Scottsdale. It seemed to happen incredibly fast, landed on top of the hospital, and they brought me in and started doing the pre emergency room check of me. And then I think that's when I realized that I really wasn't being silly about it, that I really was hurt pretty badly. Once the adrenaline and elation and everything else wore off, I was sitting in this, pre-ER room. I'm not sure what they would call it. And they had given me a bunch of pain medicine, and I got really, really cold. I was in a hospital gown, this big room by myself. People have been rushing in and out. Security was there. So maybe they had told them I had a gun. I'm not sure. And then they all left. They checked me out, stabilized me, knew I was okay. And then the room just emptied. And I was shaking. I was cold, and I started bawling. It was just all of that adrenaline and relief and everything mixed in there. I just couldn't control myself. I was shivering and shaking, and like I said, I was crying. And then one of the nurses came around the corner and told me that my lawyer was there, which didn't make a whole lot of sense to me until I saw Kyle poke his head around the corner. It was like a glass wall to the building. My friend Kyle that I've mentioned is an attorney. Uh-huh. And when he got to the hospital, they didn't even know who I was yet. I was a John Doe at that point. So he was trying to have them locate me. They couldn't find me. And then he mentioned that I was struck by a snake, and that doesn't happen very much. So they knew exactly who he was talking about at that point. And they told him he couldn't go in. There was no visitors allowed, especially into this part of the ER that we were in. And this is what Kyle's good at. He's a good lawyer. So he told them he was my lawyer rather than my friend, and talked his way in. So, here's that friendly face, my good old friend, my lawyer, poking around at me. And he came in and spent time with me, which really helped. Remember, they brought me a sandwich, which there was no way I could eat. I just laid there on the gurney with Kyle until they took me back in to do the rest of what they do to process somebody when they come into the ER.
So they're prepping you for the ER, and they're going to be administering antivenin in the ER, right? Is that
Not yet. At this point, just a big dose of fentanyl, which also a funny point when I'm thinking about it. I had the IV in from the hospital, and I heard the doctor talking to the nurse about giving me fentanyl, and she she loads up the syringe that she's going to push into the IV bag, and I just remember, oh, hold on, fentanyl, that's scary.
Mhm.
So she kind of laughed at me a little bit, and she's like, just trust me, we know what we're doing. You know? So I wasn't feeling any pain, just cold at that point, and no anti-venting yet. There hadn't been, other than an ER doc to come in to make sure I was stable. So they brought me back in for a further exam, and super awkward, laying on felt like a metal table anyway, stripped all my clothes off, checked my whole body to see if there were any other injuries or anything else they needed to worry about. And then, they got me back dressed in a gown and put me into a room in the ICU. And pretty quickly after that, toxicologist doctor showed up specifically. And the first thing he did was he had the nurses do a really precise measurement around my foot, above the ankle, which was getting pretty big at this point. It was yellow and dark colored, and my leg was swelling, most of the way up to my waist already by that point on my right side. So he took measurements. He measured where the puncture wounds were. He took a measure of the diameter of my foot. I learned later he was worried about compartmental system, or a syndrome, I think is what they call it. Basically, where your foot gets so swollen that it breaks the skin, it breaks open, just pulls it apart. Diamondback venom is primarily a hepatotoxin, I know now. And the short story of that is it's breaking down your blood your cells, your blood vessels. So it's basically just like almost liquefying your flesh inside where that happened. So they monitored it incredibly closely. I mean, I think every 20 minutes they were measuring again. I had all sorts of pen marks on my ankle where they were measuring it. And that's when they started administering the antivenin. The antivenin it felt like nothing. In fact, I think they had already injected some into the IV bag before they even told me that it was there. I hadn't really thought about it, but of course, right, that's what they're going to do. So, I spent the next 3 days in ICU, high doses of pain med, and measuring my foot for 3 days. I think they backed off to every half an hour and then every hour. I spent 3 days. They took really good care of me, but sort of in and out of consciousness. At this point, more from the pain meds than anything else. After 3 days, the swelling hadn't gone down, but I was stable, no trouble breathing. My foot was going to be okay. The necrosis hadn't. I wasn't going to lose any part of it. I was healthy enough that I moved into just a normal hospital room, and spent another night there. And the next day, I got to see Jay for the first time since that had all happened. The hospital had a rule that only one visitor could come in, not per day, one visitor, period. Because of the lockdown of the COVID pandemic. So Kyle was amazing. One of the big benefits I got out of all this is how many people I had in my life that really show up, that really cared about me. So every day Kyle would come in. A couple times he came in twice a day, and he'd bring me food and he'd sit there with me. And it was just so appreciated to have him there. But after the fourth day, I got released, and I did not feel better. My leg did not feel better. I hadn't even sat up before that day, other than to be wheeled to the other room. And anytime that I went vertical of any sort, even just sitting on the side of the bed, it was a kind of pain I've never experienced before, and hopefully never again. It felt like there was a fire inside of me, and it would start at my ankle. And the longer that I stayed vertical, sitting on the side of the bed, it would intensify, and it would work its way up the inside of my leg, past the knee all the way up into my thigh. And I mean, again, it was the worst pain I've ever felt. It was just absolutely unbearable. And that was one of the two rules, of course, that it was going to take for me to get out of the hospital. I'd need to stand up on my own. Well, there were three, I guess. I had to stand up on my own. I had to not need the intravenous pain medicine, and I had to go to the bathroom on my own. Those were three very difficult things to do, but I was pretty motivated to get out of the hospital at that point. So Jay came to pick me up. I had just that morning been able to tolerate sitting up on the side of the bed, and I accomplished all the other goals that they set out. So they wheeled me up to the discharge area, and then out into the lobby where Jay could meet me. They had taken that little pistol I was talking about and given it to security, and it took us probably an hour to locate security, and then for them to open the safe. And it was just, I mean, that hour was more painful than any of it that I had experienced while I was in the canyon. Just my whole bottom half of my body was just on fire. And again, I was pretty helpless, as wherever Jay wanted to push me in the wheelchair, but I couldn't get up. I couldn't lay down to get relief from it. And I was just so annoyed with the security. And I was just leave it here. We don't even need it back, right? I just want to go home. So they wouldn't let me do that. Security protocol, I guess. But so, yeah, we left. Jay got me into his pickup truck. I had just a miserable ride home, as you can imagine. And got home, got down on my couch, and I really didn't get off that couch much for the next 3 weeks from there as I healed.
So you've been on your couch for 3 weeks. Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't the worst time in the world. I work for myself. I'm my own business, and there wasn't much going on at that point, late in the pandemic. So it was a pretty good time, at least for all of that to happen, where it was easy for me to, put my life responsibilities on hold. My daughter was in another place for college, and I didn't need to go to work. So at least there was that. But I'm almost ashamed to say how much I kind of enjoyed those weeks. It was painful, and I was, it was going from the couch to the bathroom. Those sorts of things were brutal. But my sister, just immediately, no questions, no thoughts about it. She dropped what she was doing in her life and came from Tucson to Scottsdale, and just moved in with me, taking care of me. I was kind of an invalid at that point, in the first few days, couldn't even go to the bathroom by myself. Just so grateful for that support. But it was so much more than just her. I mean, she did so much of it for me, but over the next 2 weeks, I had friends coming by and bringing me food, and they'd come over and stand in the doorway, excuse me, in the doorway of my house, and we'd be talking, from the living room to the doorway, social distancing and all. But I mean, every day I had a visitor or two come over, and my sister was there to take care of me and my family. And, I had so much support over those weeks. So, I was just happy to be okay and out of the hospital and, new perspective on life. And, I was in a good place with the rest of my life to be taking this time off. And then for the people just showing up for me, people that, I considered friends, but, they're coming by every day to see me. And, it was just every day was just very heartwarming. And every day I started feeling a little bit better. So I saw the end of it anyway.
Hmm.
So, and then, as I spent the last few weeks of, the real true recovery in Tucson with my sister and brother-in-law. Again, just taking care of everything for me. I'd gotten to the point where I could drive a little bit. I could stay, in an upright position. So I had a little bit of mobility. But yeah, those were really special weeks for me. That recovery period. There was so much love and support around me for everything. And of course, I was the cool guy with a great story to tell as well. Everybody wants to hear that story. So yeah, it's a little bit of an odd ending to the story, I guess. But yeah, those were really great weeks.
No, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense to me. And I could imagine, I mean, I don't know, but was it nice to just be able to step away from the conveyor belt of life, work and stuff for a while too? I mean, and have a very unambiguous situation, or task you have to heal.
Yeah, it was a blessing. I mean, that just everything lining up there for me to be able to heal was just a blessing. The just like you said, I didn't all the normal things to do, right? I mean, people were bringing me food and helping me keep my house clean, and there wasn't much to do with my business at that point, which had been a stressful point before, but now it was a blessing.
Hmm.
So I was very blessed to have, really a month of just being able to focus on myself and healing. So, I slowly got off the couch. I had to use a walker for a while. One of my friends fashioned like a pack on the front of my walker so I could just put, stuff that I just needed, little things in it, and scoot across my house. And so I started getting a little bit of mobility, and I hated that walker. But soon the walker went away, and I, went to a cane, and I could get myself to and from the car, and just slowly I regained my just freedom again, and didn't have to rely on everybody.
Hmm.
But having that time, like you said, was such a blessing. To just reflect on the situation and what I had been through and what I had learned through it, and the thoughts that I had, and then just that outpouring of support, and from the DPS officers to the especially the ICU nurses were just incredible. The toxicology doctor just did an amazing job. My friends just ready to help, drive me home, get me food, just anything that I needed was supported there.
Well, in the few minutes we have remaining here, I think that's probably a good segue into my kind of final questions for you here. What in the years since that time, how has your understanding of the experience, your feeling about the experience, how has it changed? I mean, I was just thinking about I used to trail run in around Tucson, and I've had many close encounters with rattlesnakes, and I started thinking after a while, well, it's just kind of a matter of time. The more I'm out here, the more likely it is I'm going to get hit. And thankfully, I never did. But I can just think of a few things that you've mentioned over the course of this discussion that really struck me. One is that, for those of us who live in Arizona, especially southern Arizona, we might have some encounters with rattlesnakes, but at least for me, I feel like I am still pretty ignorant about I mean, much less ignorant now after talking.
Right.
But you were saying, you're a seasoned hiker, you and Jay both, veteran hikers. You love being outdoors in the wilderness, and yet, you didn't have a strong grasp of what to do in the case of a rattlesnake um, bite, and then now also hearing about this experience from you, I can just see that it is, the impact can be pretty profound on a variety of registers. So maybe you could just let the last couple of minutes here, let us know what you've been thinking about, and how that's changed over the course of these last few years.
Well, a really big part of that was what I was going to do um, with this passion for the outdoors. It was very difficult to get back out, especially in the desert, but to get out and be a part of it. Um, but I really couldn't not do it. It's just too important for me to be healthy and balanced that I need to have that time out in nature like that. So it's been a pretty constant challenge for me to balance the fact that I need to be doing this, and there's just no way to, like you said, to prevent completely the risk of being struck by a snake like that. I've had hundreds of encounters probably with rattlesnakes like you have. I've some of them have been too close for comfort. One other time, the snake didn't rattle, so of course I got closer than I would have otherwise.
Mhm.
Um, and I've actually had a couple since then as well. But every time that I am hiking on a warm day where there's brush or grass, I am very hyper aware, and it's really easy for me to be startled and almost paralyzed with it. I went for a hike just this last summer. It's been a few years since my incident. And, it was spring, just getting warm, and there, I ended up running into two different rattlesnakes on the same hike. And the first one was over on the side of the path, and I could hear it, and there was plenty of room for me to get around it, but it must have taken me a half an hour, Jeff, on that trail, just to get myself around it, to the other side of the trail so I could keep walking. And once I did that, I was preoccupied with the thought that I was going to have to come back down this trail and do it again.
Mhm.
Um, but I haven't let any of this stop me. I feel like I can't. This is what I like to do. This is my my religion, my church, my therapy. So there's been a lot of that, overcoming fear and doing the thing because you need to be doing it. There's also the fact that, I've realized there's not much you can do about a rattlesnake bite other than get to the hospital faster. You can wear gaiters or tall boots, which aren't really practical in a desert that's so hot. But if a person is struck by a rattlesnake and they get to help with some antivenom within an hour or so, it's not going to be anywhere near the same sort of extreme situation that I was in.
Mhm.
4 days in the hospital, and I didn't mention this, but I ended up with 35 vials of antivenom in those 3 days in the ICU. For a little point of reference, from what I understand, 8 is sort of the average. And the reason that I needed so much more was because of the time. It was 6 or 7 hours from being struck to getting the first dose of antivenom. So, point where I'm going to with that is I bought a Garmin, Garmin InReach, very small GPS device. So anywhere that I am, phone signal or not, I can send my GPS coordinates and a message to emergency responders. So that is how I manage my fear. I may get struck. This may happen again, but I know what to do and I know what's going to happen to me and I know how to get to help faster.
Yeah, right. Well, I imagine, it's, I mean, that was a traumatic situation that you went through. So probably your response, and I would imagine it's a trauma response too, which is, of course, very deep.
Yeah, I expect I'll probably have that sort of response around obviously snakes, but in those environments, I'm expecting that'll be with me for the rest of my life. I think it'll get easier, but it really, like I said, comes down to if I get struck, I know I'm going to be okay now.
Yeah, right, right. Wow. Well, Justin, thank you so much for sharing this experience, this profound experience near death, all the things that went along with it, and of course this amazing story of all the support you had. And I'll just say, in the interest of disclosure, full disclosure, you are my brother-in-law, and your sister is my wife. So,
And thank you for your part in taking care of me, Jeffrey. That was a very important time for me.
oh yeah, well, it was our pleasure to have you, and we were glad to be able to help. Uh, so yeah, so thank you so much, and yeah, well, maybe we'll check in down the road a little bit and to see um, how your sense of the experience has changed over time.
I'd be happy to anytime. It's been a good experience for me to go back and examine all of this again, um, just to keep it fresh, and it's the good parts of it that I remember.
Well, I know you've been doing some writing about it, so maybe I'm just going to get you to commit publicly that maybe put you on the spot. Maybe we can make some of that available to people who listen to this podcast down the road.
Well, that's definitely something I'd be willing to talk about.
Okay, nice. Well, thanks so much.